Welcome to the Tao of Pizza, where we feature top logistics leaders, entrepreneurs, and supply chain innovators and share their inspiring stories with a holistic twist.
Mark Hiddleson here, host of the Tao of Pizza podcast, where I talk with top industry innovators in the warehousing, logistics, and supply chain business with a holistic twist. And before I introduce today's guest, Yvonne Sams, this episode is brought to you by Specialized Storage Solutions. And look, I've been in the logistics and storage industry for several decades, and I know I don't look that old, but it's true. What we do is we provide industry-leading warehouse storage solutions nationwide. So basically, if you have a warehouse and needs racks, shelving, carts, conveyors, or mezzanines, we help with the design, engineering, installation, inspections, and repairs to help our clients optimize their logistics operations. And it's funny, Yvonne, some people don't even realize we can actually help with permit acquisition services as well. So we take a holistic look at your entire business supply chain ecosystem to develop the resources for continually improving your operation. To learn more, visit our website at specialracks.com. Give us a call at 707-732-3892 or send me an email. I give my personal email out to podcast listeners. It's markhiddleson@aol.com. So send me an email if you're ready to take your warehouse storage and retrieval systems to the next level. So today we're joined by Yvonne Sams, who has a remarkable 25 plus years experience in the agricultural, food, and beverages industry. She specializes in supply chain management, and her expertise lies in various areas, including leading large teams, strategic thinking, driving sales growth, efficient operations management, optimizing warehouse operations, and continuous improvement initiatives, and adeptly applying situational leadership. This extensive background makes for a seasoned supply chain executive leader with a proven track record in the field. Yvonne, welcome to the Tao of Pizza.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Mark.
Yeah, this is awesome. You are an ideal guest. When I started the podcast, it's been like 2 years, but it's a way to meet people who are innovators like you are. And I kind of knew of you because we have been in the same geography. I'm from Modesto, Ripon, and you were with G3, I think, most of your career. And so I always kind of knew it was like a name, like, should be a great guest.
Yeah, I'm a transplant to the Central Valley. And so I actually am a coastal girl. Grew up in the Monterey Bay. And so coming to the Central Valley was definitely a transition. And yeah, it's a place that I now love, but I didn't always.
Awesome. And I saw you lived in Oakdale, and
Yeah.
I think you said, Michelle Powers.
Yeah, she lives, she went to high school with my husband.
In Oakdale.
Yes, at Oakdale High. Yeah.
I met Michelle like 20 something years ago, and she's like, she goes, I'm from Oakdale. And I go, yeah, I could tell. And it was kind of a joke, but you kind of can. I mean, there is a Central Valley. I love Oakdale. I mean, I love the people from the Valley. I mean, it's a different vibe. I mean, Monterey Bay probably has a really cool culture.
Yeah, different culture. Definitely different culture. Definitely coastal snob. Coming to Modesto initially, and I went to school in the Central Coast there in San Luis Obispo at Cal Poly, and so just really spent my whole life on near the beach, and then I came to the Central Valley with dairies and with agriculture that I hadn't seen before, and I really thought I moved to hell.
Everybody, so I'm from the Central Valley. I've lived in Napa for the last 26 years. And we will joke that we moved out of hell, but I love the Valley. I love the orchards. I mean, give me an almond orchard and I'm like, yeah, like you told me when the almond thing last week or a few weeks ago. So what was the opportunity that brought you, share a little bit about how, it had to be something great, I would think, to move, right?
Yeah, so I had been in school at Cal Poly and got a job offer at Frito Lay here in Modesto. And that's how I landed here. My husband was from the area. He was my boyfriend at the time. He had a job at Frito Lay in Bakersfield. And so we were trying to figure out like where we were going to live, what we were going to do. And I ended up in Modesto with Frito. And so spent a couple of years with us trying to figure out what we were going to do. And then ultimately he made, we agreed that I was going to have to move multiple times for his career later. He needed to make the first move for me. Alcohol might have been involved. A napkin I made him sign might have been involved. And so he made the first move to come home essentially to where his family was from. And that's how we ended up in Modesto. But then we spent 5 years in Illinois. And after I think I was here 7 years when we moved to Illinois and then came back to Modesto. Gallo actually brought my husband back. And that was the time that I realized after day 2, I love Modesto. I love the Central Valley. Midwest is wonderful and the people are amazing. I made some great friends, but the weather, you cannot, absolutely not match the weather that we have here in California. And then I was 2 hours from the mountains, 2 hours from the beach. In Illinois, I was literally in the middle of nowhere. And we lived in Chicago area for a couple of years. So we were close to some water, which also created snow, weather, lake effect weather. Day 2. And I've been here, gosh, I think I've been here another 18, 19 years, and I love every minute of it. And I love the Central Valley. Huge. I don't consider myself a Central Valley girl yet.
So I was
coastal girl. So coastal girl. But I do absolutely love the Central Valley. The Central Valley is a place that I call home. And Oakdale, we ended up in Oakdale. That's where my husband grew up. And when my in-laws have passed, we renovated their home and moved back to their house. So it's really been kind of full circle for us. And so love Oakdale, love Modesto, love just being up and down the valley has been so fun. So Frito Lay is what initially brought me here. I made Cheetos, Sun Chips, and potato chips. Super cool job.
What year was that? Just you mind if I ask what year?
Yeah, so I moved to Modesto in 1995. That was my first stint in Modesto. And so I led teams of manufacturing folks who were we literally made chips.
Yeah.
And the plant wasn't that old. So the plant had just opened. So it might have been 5 years old by the time I got there.
Yeah.
And so it was a pretty brand new, beautiful facility that had just come into Modesto only been there a little while. They've now since expanded and done some great things, but I worked in a shift essentially. So I ran a day shift and a swing shift, and yeah, super fun stuff.
We toured that. So I'm pretty sure I met you through a Warehouse Education and Research Council meeting, but it was probably at G3.
Yes.
We've toured Frito Lay. That's an amazing facility. I mean,
I was on that tour.
On the Frito Lay tour or the
yeah. On the both. I was definitely on the Frito Lay tour because I went back. It was like 10 years that I hadn't been there, and I go on the work tour, and the plant is hilarious because you have a couple people who roam. Most have to stay by their machines, but the cadence of the way the message got out to the floor that I was there literally went down the line. They're like, Yvonne's in house. And all of a sudden, I couldn't even finish the tour because all my old employees were like coming out to find me and to come see me. And so I got stuck in the packaging room. Wow. And, talking to, and my team, I had a day shift team when I first started. And so they were the highest seniored folks that were still there 10 years later. So got to walk by them. And then, my swing shift, when I went to swing shift and potato chips, those guys were had enough seniority now to be on day shift. So it was just a swarm of fun. So yeah,
I love those tours. I haven't been involved in the board. I was for 10 years. You're supposed to be like 5 years and then phase out.
Oh yeah.
You go into you start out as like board member at large and then secretary treasurer. Just like every year you move up, and the year you're past president, you're president, and then past president. So really the past president stays on the board.
Oh.
It was Chris Murphy and I think Stan Jimenez. We were on
I know Stan, yeah.
So we know a lot of people, but I stayed on the board just because I loved helping set up tours, and that's what it's hard to find. So we're actually looking for tours because in person, they tours kind of stopped.
Yeah, after COVID. Yep.
but it's one of the best ways. I've interviewed a lot of people on the show and asked them, what's the best way to learn about warehousing logistics, to do a tour, even if it's not related
To see it.
to your business.
Yeah.
You were with Gallo G3. I would call it Gallo. People don't know.
So I left Frito. So I left Frito and I moved to a pre-cut produce warehouse job. That was my kind of first warehouse job, was working at a pre-cut produce. They were called Pacific Pre-Cut out of Tracy. And we were doing, this is dating myself, but that was all before pre-bagged lettuce. And so our plant was working with Save Mart, Safeway, and we were bagging lettuce for their delis. And so we were doing all the pre-made produce ingredients for all their salads. So whether it was a potato salad, macaroni salad, we were cutting everything for them and then sending it to them. So my warehouse turned over every 7 days. It was a very high volume, fast turn because it was produce and it was pre-cut. They sold to Taylor Farms. We were just in the middle of making those pre-made salads, which now are all the rage. And those, we were kitting them and we're trying to figure out like shelf life and what kinds of things, how do you marry all the shelf lives between the chips and the lettuce and the, what kind of products can go in it that won't make everything go bad, tomatoes, like things like that, like olives, like how do you do it? And then how long would it last on the shelf? And so we were doing some really cool, innovative things. As I then left there to go work at Gallo. So I actually spent 2.5 years at Gallo. And so my first stint in warehousing was there at Pacific Pre-Cut. Yeah. So I went from Pacific Pre-Cut to Gallo and working in a department that sat inside their warehouse. And it was a department that essentially would fix the winery and the glass plant's mistakes. So if there was a wrong label or a missing label or glass was defective, my team was responsible for identifying what those issues were and then fixing them. And so my job was to figure out how to see myself out of a job. So what Gallo wanted was they wanted us to figure out how to reduce the people that we had in that department and ultimately try and get rid of it because it was not cost effective to have to reprocess.
Yeah,
products.
It's not ideal to start a separate division.
Right. And to have its own department, like it literally had its own department. It was a big department. We had about 120 people in this 3-shift operation. And Gallo was at a point, though, that they were transitioning their management to the professionals. And so they were just starting to I get budgets in place and trust people with information about financials. All that was pretty held close to the vest, rightfully so. They're privately held. And what they had done, different departments had hired like 3 or 4 different people from Frito Lay. So I had a connection with the Frito folks coming into Gallo, and Gallo they had these recruiting conferences where they hired all these, I'm going to call them up and coming leaders. And I happened to be one of them, part of that team. And I was the very first person that I'm going to call it infiltrated the warehouse. So I was part of the warehouse and trying to identify how things can be done differently than what they had always been done. So then 2 more people came after me. So there were 3 of us in the warehouse. Then they hired a new warehouse manager that came in, and he quickly got promoted up to the VP of supply chain. And so the 4 of us really came in to help support and move Gallo's warehouse kind of to that next level.
Are you going to tell me who was the one that got promoted right away? Yeah.
So his name is Ernie Chasseray, and you want to interview him.
Okay.
This dude is amazing. My mentor. So it came from P&G, and at P&G, what they do is they hire you into an operations role, but everybody before you can become a plant manager has to have a stint in HR. So you have to have been an HR manager. So they rotate you through HR, and he's just super well-rounded, amazing supply chain expert. And if it wasn't for him, I would have been stuck in Illinois.
Oh, nice. That's a great reason.
Yeah, I definitely. So,
Yeah.
so at that time, while I was at Gallo, I then got to help start up a warehouse management system. And Gallo wasn't as big as it is today, but was still big. And there was lots of departments that had to be included as part of this transformation of a new warehouse management system. So they actually pulled all these people together. There was probably 40 of us on this core team to start up this warehouse management system. We had a really antiquated system at the time. And in the middle of all this, my husband took a job in Chicago. And so he pulls out the napkin and says, okay, it's time for us to move. And I was like, seriously, like I'm in my dream job. I was getting ready to be promoted into a safety training manager role. Like I was super excited, and we pick up and we move to Illinois. And so he is a plant manager. He's also in food and beverage. He is been working, at the cannery since he was 16. So he's a plant guy. He's an expert guru in plant food manufacturing. And so we end up in Chicago, and I get a phone call from my mentor, Ernie, and the president and CEO of G3, Bob Lubeck, another person you probably want to talk to. And I'll text you these guys' names. They're amazing individuals. So I get this random phone call from these two top executives at Gallo and G3 asking me to start up a regional distribution center in Chicago for Gallo. And I was a stay-at-home mom at the time. I had one kid. I might have had two. I might have had my second daughter then. And I was like, okay, this sounds cool. Let's go figure this out. And they're like, well, we'd love for you to run the RDC, not just start it up, but run it. Well, my husband had already taken a job in Central Illinois. So I was like, well, I can't run it. That's just not going to happen. If 2 weeks ago you had called me, we would have made different decisions. House is on the market. He's getting ready to go. But I'll help you start it up. So I had two kids under the age of 3. And I lived in a hotel because my house sold in 2 weeks. And for 4 months, and started up this warehouse for the E&J Gallo Winery. And it was Gallo's first time forward deploying product. They had a lot of out of stocks, and everything was centralized in Modesto. So it would take a couple weeks via rail to get their product cross country. And so to minimize their out of stocks, they were piloting this regional distribution center concept and to forward deploy product. So Chicago was their first RDC that they were going to start up. And I had the opportunity to start it up. It was literally a gray box of cement. We brought in 1 million cases. We striped the lines. We put in the VMU, I'm gonna call them VMUs, but the vehicle interface units where the employees needed to scan, barcode everything. All the aisles were barcoded.
Share a little bit more about what you mean by VMU. You mean the barcodes themselves, or because if you do,
so I implemented all the technology that was, all the systems that it took to create that. We call it Bluetooth today, but it wasn't called that back then. It was the old school. Now I can't think of the technology that it was called. But so all of the systems to be able to have scanning capability, which was fairly newer. And so it was a fairly state-of-the-art warehouse, but I hired the folks to come in. We had to Post in Chicago had just shut down. So I was super excited because we hired quite a few of their experienced drivers from Post, but they were used to moving light products, so cereal, and wine is very heavy, and you have to clamp wine, or we clamped wine. Yeah. So one of my main jobs in starting up that warehouse was cleaning up a whole bunch of wine, because we made a lot of compressions that were a little too tight that broke wine, but hired the people, striped the lines, put in all of the computer systems, the interface on all the forklift leases, computers, offices, got everything up and running, and then handed it over to the warehouse manager that was going to run the warehouse. And I worked very closely with one of Gallo's oldest distributors, the Johnson brothers. So really had some great experience. And then I moved. So moved to Central Illinois, and Gallo actually asked if I would be willing to go out and start up the rest. They were going to start up 6 additional warehouses. Well, at that point, I had 2 kids at home, and to travel like that, I just couldn't do it. So I declined the opportunity, which was super unfortunate. But 3 years later, they hired my husband to come work at Gallo, which is what moved us home.
Nice. That's full circle. Yeah.
Yes. That's how we ended up back in Modesto. And it was, again, one of the best things that, we could have ever done. So my husband goes to work at you probably could talk to him too, because he ended up running Gallo's warehouse. So Gallo has 60 acres of warehouse space. They have 4 rail car lineups that come into their warehouse with 9 cars per line, massive 77 million cases that they, produce and then ship out of that Modesto facility. So it's a massive place. A few months later, after coming back to Modesto, Ernie comes to me again with Bob Luback, and they say, "Okay, Yvonne, we'd like you to go work at G3." And I was like, "Oh, I really don't want to work at G3. I really wanted to work at Gallo. Like, that's kind of where my heart is at Gallo." And they're like, "Yeah, no, that's not going to happen." And I'm like, "What do you mean? Like, how rude?" And they're like, "Well, no, you can't go work at Gallo because you and your husband will start to stifle each other's careers. Can't do that. You need to go to G3. And I was like, "Okay, what would the job be?" So I meet my boss who was looking to figure out how to sell logistics, because G3 is the logistics arm for Gallo.
Yeah,
they do all their warehousing and transportation on all fronts. So the raw materials coming in and the finished goods going out. And so they're the carrier of choice, and they're the the company that does all their logistics. So my job was to figure out how to sell Gallo's excess capacity between warehousing and transportation. And I was like, I'm not a salesperson. I'm an ops person. Like, how am I going to go sell? Like, I really was unsure. And it was a business development role, which I really like the term business development, because nobody wants to talk to a salesperson. I don't mean that disrespectfully to any salespeople out there. But for me, I didn't want to talk to a salesperson. So I got to choose my title. And so I chose business development. I'm like, that's like a way better entry to talking to people. And so I went around the wine industry trying to figure out how to sell warehousing, how to sell trucking. I knew nothing about trucking. And that was what my mentor said. He's like, "Look, you need to have more, complete your supply chain experience with transportation. You have warehousing and manufacturing, like you now will have sales and trucking." And I was like, "Oh, okay, that sounds kind of cool, but that sounds lame. Like, I don't want to do trucking."
Business development and trucking.
Business development, maybe.
Yeah.
So I really got the opportunity to learn about import exports, about mineral hauling, because the glass plant, we hauled sand, limestone, soda ash. I got to learn about rail with BNSF and UP, and then all of the little interchanges that are across the country. I got to learn about all the different ports that we were hauling to and shipping out of. I got to understand all the different steamship lines. So really, really cool job to figure out. That's really where I became active in work, because it was like, okay, there's this opportunity. And there was a training that work did around how to sell. And the thing that I realized through that training that I still use today is that the best people to sell are the people who've been running the operation.
In this business, it is. That's one of the things, because a lot of my clients, and I like it too, because I've always been in sales, and I've never, like, you didn't offend me when you said, but I have a thing called sell without selling. Like, I try not to be salesy, but one of the things I love in this, and I feel like I'm the same way, I'm an operator. I'm like, my real skills, like, I know how to run a business. I know how to run a project. I know how to follow up and do like professional stuff, do my homework, that you don't look at all that as part of sales. But I love it. The clients, one of the reasons I love this industry is the salespeople. They're the ops. You have to be, or you don't know what you're selling. They're like,
Right.
oh yeah, we
No,
can do that. And you're like, no, we can't.
no,
No,
you can't. You can't just make stuff up. Like it just
yeah,
doesn't work that way.
yeah.
And so that was some of that work training was really, really instrumental in what developed, me and my ability to build businesses. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I didn't realize how intricate trucking and warehousing was and how important they were to
Mhm.
each other. And so I spent a lot of time I spent 4 years in the role just trying to figure out, okay, here's where we can sell. I had a lot of challenges, and my one biggest challenge is the wine industry wanted nothing to do with supporting Gallo.
Ah,
And there was what we termed as Gallophobia. And so nobody wanted to work with us because they're going to give their competitor money. Like they don't want to do that.
right.
And so I spent a lot of time trying to figure out, like, okay, what line of business, I had 9 lines of business I was selling. So I was trying to figure out what was the best areas that we could go into to truly work within the industry and sell Gallo's capacity. And one of them was warehousing. We had at the time about 1 million square feet on site that we could sell. That was kind of excess capacity. Um, Today they have about, well, they're probably a little bit more even now, but when I left a couple of years ago, they were at 5 million square feet of warehouse space here just in the Modesto area. And so, there was lots of opportunity to provide space and customize space and really support the industry. We were really confident within the finished wine, but just as confident in storage of glass and any of the other kind of ingredients and raw materials that takes to make wine. So that was an area that I focused in and spent a lot of time with work trying to, build competency because we were good at big volume. We were not good at 5,000 not acres, 5,000 square feet,
Right.
10,000 square. We were big
Yeah.
volume because that's how Gallo lived. So to try and do something a little bit smaller, kitting, things like that, we just weren't competent yet. And so we were trying to figure out, do we want to get into that business? Do we not? Who are our competitors? Who can we learn from? Is it something Gallo would need? And then we can kind of learn with Gallo and then branch it off, like all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So we learned a lot. We were getting ready to sunset my job. So I found about 3 or 4 lines of business that we could actually sell and do a great job with and grow. And there was a lot of lines of business that were dedicated just to Gallo. And so the regional distribution system that I started up when I was in Chicago was off the tables. That was a Gallo competitive advantage. No way. We were not
Yeah.
going to be able to sell that.
Yeah. You don't want
So
to provide access to a network that you built for
that
yourself.
we built for Gallo to then allow somebody else to have that same network. So
Interesting.
no way.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was off the table. But as the time I was transitioning out of this role, I didn't have a job. So I was thinking, okay, like, what am I going to go do? The ag manager who had 40 years under his belt was retiring. And ag for us meant wine grapes moving from the vineyard to the processor. And so if we go back just a little bit, well, I was at Cal Poly, I was in a major called Ag Engineering Technology. And it was a major that was all men. I was the only woman in the major. And we did things. We did things like welding, milling, lathing, like we rebuilt engines, we worked on gas and diesel, and we worked on small and large, and we rebuilt trailers. And the major was really for guys to go back to their family farms and ensure that they were, could build a maintenance shop that was safe and that they had safety protocols and that they could work on their equipment, large and small, things like that. Well, what was I going to do with this major? Like I wanted nothing to do with this major. I thought it was really stupid. And we built chassis and we looked at fasteners and I was just like, this is so dumb. But I ended up being the first woman to graduate in this major. And then they changed the following year, they changed the name of the major. And I ended up being the only woman to graduate in the major.
Oh, how awesome is that?
So full circle, I come into, 4 years into G3 and I raise my hand to be the ag manager. And my boss looks at me and she's like, why would you want to run ag? I'm like, I don't know. I just feel like I've come home. Like it feel like going back to my major, like I get trucking, I get engines, I get chassis, I get maintenance shops. Like those are all things that I I studied. I had no idea why I did it, way back then. But this is where I really want to be on the ag side. And she was like, I don't know, we got to talk to the president, who was Bob Lubeck. And Bob said, okay, like if she's interested, give her a try. Like, let her see what she can do. I doubled the business twice. And it was grape growers that I connected with. And I understood that grape growing was just manufacturing, but in a field.
Yeah.
And I understood winemaking and winemakers because and the wineries because it was production. I worked in operations, so I understood and I facilitated between the field and the operation. And my big thing was, look, everybody needs to be efficient. The field needs to be efficient. The winery needs to be efficient, but not at the expense of trucking. It was very easy for everyone to be efficient, but just let trucks sit and let trailers sit. So I was very big on, hey, we all got to win. So let's look up some win-win situations and how we can all be efficient, because I want you to be efficient, but not at my expense. Like, we're not going, or I'm going to charge you for that, because that's not okay.
Yeah.
So spent a lot of time just partnering with the industry and working with them and figuring out how to be efficient. And it was fun. We went from about 18% of market share to 45% market share.
Wow.
Yeah. It was.
So what are some examples? Because it's interesting. All your you've answered all the questions I was going to ask you, like who's your mentors and all this. You already answered. You're the greatest.
I just keep talking. I'm sorry.
All time. No, this is great. But the win-win. Certain industries are like that. And then when we choose our clients, it's like, how do you treat your vendors? And it's like, well, because we're big, we can treat people a certain way. But it's always like, no. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to be your vendor if you're looking at it. So what are some of the things in that culture with trucks? What are the few of the things that you were able to, because the scheduling thing is some trucks don't show up on time. That's what my guys, they're always like, the trucking, it's the hardest part.
It's the hardest part.
So what are some of the things?
So 40 years, I was replacing a guy with big shoes to fill, and he literally had size 14 shoes. Like, this guy is big dude, like big dude. Like, how am I going to fill those kinds of shoes? So what I did my first year was I interviewed the employees that had been with us for 20 plus years. I interviewed the carriers, because we don't own trucks. We own the trailers. So we had to have carrier partners. Okay. And so I interviewed the carrier partners to say what's working, what's not. If you were me, what would you change? What would you focus on? I interviewed customers. Gallo was our largest customer. And but we build growers. So growers were also our customers, direct customers. So some of the long-standing customers, we had some really, really grouchy customers, and they're farmers. So they're kind of annoyed that every year we have the same issue with G3 and I have to use you, and now I'm mad at you because I don't want to, and you suck. But
that's it. Those are the three things I don't want to.
I have to, and you suck. Like, those are like the things that I would be told very colorfully. And so I gathered all this data and said, okay, the theme is that we've had growers, the same issues occur year over year, because we were a seasonal business. Mm-hmm. So because 4 months, you come in, you get out. Like, and the team was seasonal. So they came in a week before, they did their stuff, they got out a week after. Like, and billing was a mess, and everything was pen to paper, and the same issues occurred over and over and over again. And the number one thing that still resonates with me is I had customers say, Yvonne, I used to tell you when you didn't bill me for loads. I stopped. So if you can't figure it out, not my problem.
Yeah, because that's what happens in this kind of relationship. It's not win. It's like, why am I helping you win if you're
not going to help me? Like, you just aren't fixing the issues and you're a nightmare. And not that they weren't trying. It was just a seasonal business and nobody really had the time. So when I came in, I was actually going to be year round. So I had the opportunity to focus on this business year round. So during the season, we ran operations. During the off season, we fixed process. We were supposed to fix processes and sell. Those were like, so I had the best of both worlds. I got to run the operation and I got to go meet customers where they were and sell. And grape growers are some of the best, like, people to work with. They work hard, play hard, and I'm all in for that. Like, let's go work hard, play hard. And so the first year, I just billed for all our loads. Like it looked like I grew the business, and I actually I did.
That's when we were doing this all like, yeah, I grew the
all
building.
along. I just billed for all the loads. And we talked about how, how to keep track and what to do and how important it is. And we talked to carriers. You don't get paid if we don't get paid. And, and trying to get them to to educate their drivers and things like that. So that was the first year. So after that, it was just about listening from that list. It took us probably 3 years or 4 years to get through that list of what's going to, satisfy and get people's issues off the table. Like, how do we address these? And it took us some seasons, but we implemented a ad kickoff, which brought in all our seasonal people. We did training with them. We helped them understand what we wanted to do. I implemented a college internship program, which means the college students had to take fall semester and fall quarter off. And that was a big sell to get them to, like, that's a big semester or quarter to have to take time off. And we went from one college. We started at Cal Poly because that's what I knew. Then we opened it up to Fresno and Chico. And then we started getting a whole bunch of students from Cornell and Notre Dame and Purdue and Texas A&M. And we end up with all these different Valley kids that had left, but then just, were willing to come back, either take that first fall semester quarter off or graduate and come work for us. And I think at our peak, we had 18 college interns out of our 50. So it just create, you create this environment of excitement and fun. And I like to joke that I get told that I made trucking sexy. Like, trucking was fun and cool, which we were bottom of the barrel. Like, we're the last to know, we're the last to get the information. We're at the field and things change and the driver knows more than we know. Like, it's messy. And it moves fast. Harvest moves fast.
Yeah.
So what I did was just really listen to people and then implement things that people told me were not good. And once I started doing that, people started seeing, okay, well, she's doing some stuff, like, okay. But as I started doing more, I started becoming, getting asked to speak about, like, how to choose a trucking provider. And I started converting wineries to I overcame the Gallo phobia. And I kept saying, we're not Gallo, we're G3. And they're like, what's the G stand for? I'm like, it's not Gallo. And they're like, we know it's Gallo Yvonne. And I'm like, I know, but, and so I really got to use my business development skills and working with growers and converting growers. And we didn't even have 100% of Gallo's business when I first started. So we went from about 50% of Gallo's business to 99% of Gallo's business. And then Gallo growers were also growing for non-Gallo. So then I had, talked to them. I'm like, do you know we haul for non-Gallo? And so we were hauling into the top 100 wineries in the state and became just this, we started investing in trailers. And so we grew this business to 45% of the market with a team of seasonals. I had a mighty team. We went from 3 of us to 12 full-timers. There's still issues. We still have building issues. We still had all this other stuff, but we were whittling away and became an industry leader, started doing, embedding people into the communities. Farmers they don't want to deal with the big box. They don't want to deal with the Home Depots. They want to go to the Ace Hardware with, the local people owned, a local grocery store, the farmer's market. They really want to support locally. So I started embedding people, and I'd hire someone, I'd hire them remote. You need to go live in that community, and you need to go they need to see you at the restaurant, see you at the grocery store, see you at the kids, whatever. We started buying farm animals at all the fairs. We had a kitty of money that we started buying and giving back to their communities to show farmers that we're invested in their interests and their communities. And it just exploded in a way that we didn't really foresee.
That's such a beautiful success story. And we do the in Napa, that's really, you're talking about wine, I know harvest, like there's friends that I don't call between September and October, or even it starts early in August.
It starts early, yeah.
Start disappearing, and they're up until 5 or 6 in the morning. So, and then sometimes getting up at 8, like I had a friend that's like, I got home at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I was up at 6 to pick up another trailer. And it's like,
Yep.
dude,
I got the phone call. Yep.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yes. And we had challenges and we had issues, but yeah, I mean, when you start to grow, you have different sets of issues. Growth actually creates more issues sometimes.
but everyone's at the livestock auction. Like,
Everyone.
that's a who's who. So we've supported that we were with Ag for Youth, which was it was a nonprofit helping people who didn't have a farm or somewhere they could raise their animal. It was a nonprofit that was providing a space and a leader of kids who really couldn't get into it because they didn't have the money.
So cool.
So we started buying that, but we're hooked on it because it is such a great way to connect with the community, and it's an investment for our business. But that's where everybody is, and
that's where they are, and that's you got to go where the customers are and what means something to them, and they'd be willing to pay a little bit more if they knew that you were giving back to their community, and that includes going to the local restaurants, going to the local diners, and shopping locally. I mean, that all mattered to our customers at the time. So my definition of success is more work. So then they said, okay, well, you're doing this thing with this, you're growing this ag business. Well, what can you do with these tanker business? So they gave me this tanker business that we doubled. I had like 34 trailers, tankers. We bought a whole bunch of tankers and ended up with like 64 tankers, and we're growing the business, and we were working on the coast with a North Coast and Central Coast wine companies, and then we paired it with warehousing and dry van trucking, and so we did all kinds of things on the coast. That was one of our big initiatives. We went from $0 on the Central Coast to a $5 million business in 3 years, and we just started seeing this machine grow. When you put good people in place and you set expectations, not expectation, vision of what we want to do. What if we did this? People just they start to see that vision, and I call it magic. They magically make things happen.
Yeah.
And it was crazy. We had to dial some stuff back. We didn't get everything right. And,
well, you got to try stuff, right? Like try anything. Like that's what it was just keep. And I love that you changed vision for expectations, because they could mean the same thing, but that has a different connotation. Vision. I mean, vision is what's possible. Expectations is like you're assuming you already know what's possible, but vision is such a better way to put that. This is awesome. We need to go another hour, but I wanted to make sure I ask you about your experience. You just recently, you're the president of the board at Cal Poly alum. How did that happen? And let me share a little bit about that.
So when I first came to Modesto in 1995, I was working a ton. Frito, I was working at least 12-hour days. So I didn't have any friends. I didn't know anybody here. I wasn't from here. And so I looked up the Cal Poly Alumni Association, and they had monthly meetings. So I was like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to make sure that I go to that. And it was just about, 10, 15 guys that all were farmers here in the central, in Modesto, that would meet. Really, they were all kind of newly married. So it was like to get away from the family for a little bit once a month to go hang out with their Cal Poly buddies. And so I just kind of joined, and I was like, hey, I'm going to come to these meetings too. And they did this golf tournament every year. And so just started helping with the golf tournament, and then became like their secretary and treasurer, and then became the president of the Modesto chapter. And we expanded the group. It was not just the 10, 15 guys anymore. We started to, see my generation, older generation started bringing all these people together to meet. And then I ended up on the Alumni Association board. So once I rolled off as president, they put me in charge of the region of like Central Valley region, which was Fresno, Sacramento, and Modesto, to kind of get, people excited and doing Cal Poly stuff. But then I moved away to Illinois. So I've gone for 5 years, and I left that role. And when I came back, the College of Agriculture needed a representative on the Alumni Association. So I got tapped on the shoulder saying, hey, you want to go back to the Cal Poly Alumni? And I was like, oh, I don't know. Like I have 3 kids. I'm working. I was like, no, not a lot of work. Not a lot of work. We just need you. And I was like, okay. So that was, I think, 2017. And here I am, 8 years later, the president, which I was not expecting. That was not in the
Yeah.
cards.
Yeah.
And
It's a great, I was, one of the things was the final, I wanted to have you on the interview, for probably a few months, but it's like, how do I reach out? And like we talked about before the call, like LinkedIn. I'm like, LinkedIn is almost kind of, I want to tag everyone who pitched me on LinkedIn to like listen to my interviews. Like, this is how you really reach out to someone on LinkedIn. It's like the common, because your common themes are just like, the Warehouse Education and Research Council. I've had Michael McKicka, who was the president. I had him on the podcast because like I built my career kind of along that and the mentors that I ran into and the things I learned and the classes I went to. So this is just so awesome. But
and
this is
it's
how you do it
full
LinkedIn.
circle. It's that like longevity. And the thing about warehousing and transportation people is it is about relationship. It's a service. And so you have to be in the industry for kind of a long time for people to feel like you're trusted, right? I think of Chris Murphy and yourself
Yeah.
who have been in the industry to try and enter the industry. And the guys before me at G3, they had been doing the transportation warehousing for decades before I got there. And it's about knowing who to call.
Yeah.
And so I entered the industry. I knew nothing about trucking. But it was about who to call and how to get involved and how to solve the problem. I don't know, like what we did and how do you do it? And but it's about that longevity and the relationship building. And Cal Poly has been a huge part of my growth for the business because my boss was from Virginia and she used to say, how do you know that person? I said, oh, I don't. She's like, well, you acted like you were best friends. I'm like, no, Cal Poly.
Yeah.
You're the Cal Poly grad. And we just like started talking. And all of a sudden, like you find connections and who do you know and what dorm did you stay in?
Yeah.
And here I am, the president of the Cal Poly Alumni Association.
Yeah. Congratulations. You deserve it. They're lucky to have you listening.
It's been fun.
Yeah.
It's been so fun. And to learn about, education and the hierarchy of how they communicate and how they work. And but then bringing the alumni, from a business perspective and what we do from a business perspective. And it's a fascinating, we have 225,000 living alumni. Yeah. What's also fascinating, and I keep kind of using these statistics, but post-COVID, 25% of our alumni now live out of state.
Wow.
And it was small before.
Huh.
So it's significant now.
Yeah.
It's a big portion of our alumni living out of state. So, how do we grow? How do we grow our involvement? Post-COVID killed a lot of social clubs and socializing and getting out and getting to see people. So how do you bring people back to the university? How do you get people back together to want to hang out? And then ultimately, give back their time, talent, and treasure.
Exactly. How do you use your time, talent, treasure? I love that. So I have one more question. And you had mentioned before when we talked on the phone that you have an idea for a podcast. And I want to hear, just give me a sketch or however much.
I can't share because it's not my idea. It's my friend's idea. And I don't want to give his idea away. But yes, I think that the cool thing that you're doing with the podcast and meeting industry folks that support what you're doing is so cool. The thing that I think could be so fascinating, there's a whole bunch of podcast ideas, but the one that I think that my friend's idea is really just about being able to have a drink over like a happy hour and have a drink together and just talk about stuff.
Yeah.
Some stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's cool. And it's relationships. So Rise 25 is the group, executive coaching. I started with them 5 or 6 years ago, but they have it's a newsletter. It's called Profitable Connections. And it's kind of about people who are doing podcasts. And it's like just a fold out. I read it cover to cover. I used to read Success Magazine or stuff like that. Yeah. Now I just read Profitable Connections. It's about the people and the podcasting because it is kind of the same, the way they do it. It's almost like reading the Success Magazine, but these are people you could just pick up the phone. And if you want to be a guest or like, you're a great podcast guest, like
I just don't shut up.
Guesting. What'd you say?
I don't shut up. I just talk.
In your career, it is a remarkable career of just the background in production and warehousing is kind of the last frontier, but you have that production where people invest a lot of training. Like that was the thing I found, like no one's investing. Now it's different. Now everybody's investing in warehousing. I mean, distribution, logistics, third party, that's all becoming supply chain. Up to my kids after they're like, oh, it's the supply chain. Well, no one knew what supply chain was.
Nobody had any idea. When we were starting out, that wasn't. Yeah.
So, no, you were a great guest. This has been awesome. I'm bummed that we're out of time because we can keep going, but you, remarkable interview. Thank you very much for
Mark, thank you for your time and for asking. I really appreciate it. It's been fun getting to know you and what you're doing, and however I can support you, just let me know. I'd love to continue to support, you, and make some contacts if you want with those two guys that I talked about.
Yeah. Awesome. Ernie and Bob.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
All right. Have a good day. Thank you. Happy holidays.
Thanks for listening to the Tao of Pizza podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.